Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I'm Wayne Norden. I'm the president of the Near Northwest District, in case you didn't know. Steve, our caterer, has made lots of food. I hope you're enjoying it. Don't be shy when you go back to get seconds. And also, the coffee pots never run out of coffee, so just keep that in mind also. As we're getting started today, I'd like to do something which we do every time, but I'm really excited this time because we've got a really large number of our board members. The district is run by a group of 10 individuals who dedicate a great amount of time to the district and to the different projects that we work on. And I'd like to just introduce these board members. The board members, would you just raise your hand when I call your name? I would appreciate that. Not yet. I haven't called your name yet. Jerry Squares is with Forged Products, and Jerry's right over here. Sonia Lopez Jimenez is with Rihanna Meals. I didn't see you raise your hand. I see it. I'm watching. We have Oompa Goyal right over here. And she just, with PNB Enterprises, and she just joined our board last month. So we want to welcome her to our board. Jerry Young with Mustang Caterpillars at the back of the room. Dr. Quentin Wright with Lone Star College North is right here. Maurice Davis with Akzo Nobel International Paint is right up here up front. And he also just joined our board. So we're anxious to get some more people involved. And Dan Candy, I thought I saw him, but apparently not. But that's good to have 6 of our board members. We're really pleased to have them. And I also want to thank them for the amount of work that they do for us. They're tremendous, great advisors, and they have a good pulse of what's going on within the community. So we appreciate that. We also, when we're talking about board members, I just want to take a moment to recognize a board member that was very close to me. Rob Birchfield passed away in March, and he was a major community leader. He was involved with the district from day one, was on our board from the start to finish, and he's going to be badly missed by everybody up here in the Northwest community because he was involved in everything. So I just wanted to share that last message with you. We also have a number of elected officials and their representatives. We have Denny Littlejohn here from Sheila Jackson Lee's office. Where is he? He's right back here. We also have Connie Esparza and Viola Garcia here with us from Aldine. We also have Christina Walsh here from State Representative Penny Morales Shaw's office, right back there. We also have Commander Ray Leon here from the Northwest Command. We want to welcome him back. He kind of started here in the North Command, and now he's the commander in the Northwest. Congratulations on those great moves. We also have Dr. Abel Garza, I'm sorry. I did that, wasn't thinking. Abel's been with Aldine. He's been with us for a long time. Sheldon Moss is here from Lone Star, right here. So with all of those different individuals that are represented, you can see that we really do have a large representation of individuals from throughout the community in the Northwest area. And the leadership that they all show is very much recognized and appreciated by all that we do. As we move along here, I just wanted to give you a quick update on a few of the Near Northwest District projects that are going on. The West Little York Pedestrian Improvement Project, the repairs are mostly completed on the damages that were done by utility installations on the new sidewalks that we had just laid. So that work is all, I'm going to say it's going to be about 90% done now. However, if you drive west on Little York, you'll see some barriers creating a bit of a problem. The West Tidwell Pedestrian Improvement Project, which we're working on, is going to be sidewalks between on Tidwell between Antoine and TC Jester. We're going to be putting new sidewalks in on both sides of that street. We also are going to be putting a new entrance into the hike and bike trail, which is at the lower level on White Oak. So that project is coming along also. That will probably be going to bid in a very short period of time. It's that close. We've also completed designs on the intersection improvements. We're doing a intersection improvement at Bingle and West Tidwell, and that project should be going on later this year. I'm going to say late fall. And then also, we've got the CDAB is a new project. It's a crime deterrence for apartments and businesses. It's our newest public gathering. People from throughout the area are invited to come to this. Each month we host law enforcement, commercial property owners, business managers, and the general public are invited to that opportunity. It's a 1 hour meeting to meet and talk and hear about the problems and the issues that are coming up within the community and the way we're going to be addressing them and asking the community to keep their eyes open for us. So we'd like to invite everybody to those particular meetings. They are held the third Thursday of each month at noon. And Walter tells me they have good lunches scheduled. Right, Walter? Okay. I want to thank you all for being here today. I know we came here to hear Roland Altinger. I can't say that name, I'm sorry. He is not, unfortunately, he got called out of town at the last minute. And so Steve, I can't find my notes here, Steve Atchison is here, and he's going to be our speaker after we take a quick break. Again, head for lunch or grab more and more coffee, and we'll start our program in about 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you. Steve is the Associate Chief Appraiser for the Harris County Central Appraisal District, or HCAD as we all like to call it. It's a position that he's held since July 2014. HCAD is one of the largest assessment entities in the United States. So he serves as CEO of 600 employees. I don't envy you. HCAD's annual assesses more than 1.8 million properties with a total market value of $790 billion. That's a billion with a B. That's a lot. Steve heads the residential property division, which includes 3 separate appraisal groups, which is valuation, field projects, and account resolution. He oversees a staff of more than 150 in this area. Before being named to his current position, he's been the residential field manager for 13 years and was responsible for a staff of 110 appraisers. He joined HCAD in 1994. He holds a BS in economics and a minor in business management from Texas A&M. He also is a registered professional appraiser, a certified chief appraiser, and a property tax assistant division certified instructor. That's a lot. Steve, welcome to the district, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we will have some questions when he completes his presentation.
Thank you. All righty. Good morning. Everybody hear me fine? Okay. Well, I'm pleased to be here with you this morning. My bosses let me know about noon yesterday that I would be doing this, as they both did get called. Our chief appraiser was going to be here, Roland Altinger, and our deputy chief, Jason Cunningham, have a legislative meeting that they had to attend. As you know, the legislative session, I think they're wrapping it up. There's a lot of bills that we kind of stay plugged in with to kind of see where they're going. As a general rule, we try to not take a side either way, but we're used often for at kind of advisory things. And there are some interesting bills, especially ones that would affect commercial that are kind of being hotly contested right now. And I'll talk about that just briefly in a minute. I think I have about 10 or 15 minutes for my comments, but but my experience says y'all may have a lot of questions for me, and those are the more interesting and the more applicable things, so we'll get there. So the first thing I want to say is we, as of January 1 of this year, changed our name from the Harris County Appraisal District to officially changing it to the Harris Central Appraisal District because, and many of you may not know this, we are not affiliated with Harris County government at all. There is no jurisdiction in Harris County. There's no mayor, there's no, judge. There's almost nobody in Harris County who has authority over us. And we are a political sub-agency of the state of Texas. We work for the more than 550 jurisdictions in Harris County that we provide an appraisal role for. And really that is one of the main things I want to get across is what it is that we actually do. In terms of who we report to, we do have a lot of bosses. The comptroller comes in and does a property value study in the odd number years. So 2023 is a property value study where they come in and check our values. In the even number years, they do what's called a map. And it's to ensure that we're following all the laws and documenting everything that we're supposed to. Obviously, we answer to a lot of citizens. We have senators and things bark at us a lot and tell us they want us to do certain things. And so we have a lot of people telling us what to do. But in terms of authority, we don't really have anyone in Harris County who tells us what to do with values. I've been with the appraisal district a little over 29 years. I've been in residential most of that time. And again, I never get calls from Commissioner's Court or from the mayor or from anyone instructing me with what to do. Right? Essentially, what we do is read the market. We use market data to value properties, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. The appraisal district has two primary functions. There's two things we do. We create an appraisal roll for our jurisdictions, and as I said, there's more than 550 jurisdictions in Harris County that all have the authority to adopt a budget and levy a tax and collect taxes. 550 jurisdictions alone. That's quite amazing. So that's our first one. The first responsibility is we appraise property and create an appraisal roll for these jurisdictions. And then the second thing we do is administer the exemptions. It's our job to record and apply all the various exemptions. I think when the property tax code first got started, was first passed in '79, it was probably 35 or 40 pages. Now there's just an ocean of exemptions. Over 65s, disabilities, there's multiple disability exemptions. There's all types of TERS and special interest zones. There's all types of things, right? There's residential homestead caps. One of the bills that's being hotly contested right now is a cap for commercial properties. And that was recently passed by the House. They passed their version, and the Senate did not pass theirs. The Senate wants no part of commercial caps. So right now that's in a deadlock, and I think we're approaching the end of the legislative session, and I don't think that that's actually going to happen. So just kind of interesting, but I don't think commercial properties are going to get a cap. As we know, property taxes go to paying all of our local services. Each state does their own thing, right? You typically have three ways that you can tax people. You can do an income tax, you can do a sales tax, or you can do a property tax. Again, each state gets to do their own thing. I don't think in Texas we're ever going to have an income tax. Matter of fact, right now, the only way that would even be legal is to have it as a referendum, and like 75% of the population would have to vote for it. So that's not ever going to happen. So then you're left with a sales tax or property tax. And the problem with the sales tax is it's so inconsistent and it's so easy to shift, right? We all buy stuff from Amazon. How do you collect sales tax from that when that company may not even be local? So that really leaves us with a property tax. Again, it's one of those necessary evils. I live in Harris County, and my value's gone up 35% over the last 2 years. The problem is I don't even have to leave my street to justify it with sales. I have sales on my street that justify it. And so it seems like it's gone up kind of ridiculously. But at the end of the day, it's what data is there to support what we've done. And so in terms of the market, I want to talk about that quickly. obviously what we've seen over the last few years, and really since 2008, right, since we got past that Great Recession, we've seen that a number of times, 2014, 2015, and that what we've seen post-COVID is we've seen these rapid escalations of the market, especially in residential, not so much in commercial. Commercial kind of did a couple of weird things once COVID hit. But what we've seen is we've had such a low inventory of properties. We've had interest rates at historic lows. If you happen to look at a chart of inflation, not of inflation, of interest rates over the last 30 or 40 years, right? So for those of us who are older, we remember that people used to get mortgages at 12 and 13 and 14%. And I remember when my wife and I bought our first home in the early 90s, and we got 6.25%, and everyone's like, wow, y'all really just crushed it. No, that was unheard of. And now, right, you advance 25 years later, and everyone's paying 6%, thinks they're getting robbed because they've all been paying 3%. And so again, when you look at a graph of that, you see it over the last 40 years, it's gone from 11 or 13%, somewhere in that range, all the way down to until last year, right, till February of last year, March of last year, we had been sitting about 3%, 3.5%, on a 30-year, and if you got a 15-year, you were actually sub 3. That money was super cheap, allowed a lot of people in homes, but it created, right, it created a little bit of a problem, because not only did we have this really low interest rate environment, we had an environment where people were wanting to stay at home. So that was really creating a lot of demand for homes. And then at the same time, you had a really low supply. COVID kind of created this whole weird thing, which some of us still don't understand, of this supply crunch. We weren't getting anything from anywhere. And so every single thing that could possibly drive values up was happening. Higher demand for properties, lower supply of properties, relatively cheap money, almost feel like free money when you're talking about 2.75 to 3% on a mortgage. And so all of this pushed values, right? And do some of us think that the way residential values or properties have gone up is absurd? It really feels absurd. And people say, well, that can't last forever. And you're right, it can't. And so we'll see when it kind of is going to come crashing down. Now the Fed has now met, I think, 9 consecutive times. They meet every 6 weeks, something like 8 times a year. And they've now, for either 8 or 9 consecutive times, have moved the interest rate up, right? And that is an attempt, and I say the interest rate, they moved the Fed's fund rate. That's the amount that banks, charge each other for overnight. That sets kind of the basis for it. And what that has effectively done, or has moved that mortgage rate. As of yesterday, I know that a 30-year mortgage is like 7.15, 7.25, and that's the highest we've seen in probably 15 to 20 years. The idea of that is to slow the economy down, and this is a weird thing, is apparently there's too many people with too many jobs and too much money, right? And it really is interesting, because on one hand, you think that's ideal, that's what we want. We want people to be employed. We talked about the lowest employment rate, or lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. Everyone's paying down debt, and then the problem is times are too good, so the Fed pumps the rate up, and now it's getting expensive to buy anything. And now what we're worried is what's going to happen, right? And so when we're getting to January 1 of each year, appraisal districts get to January 1 of each year, and we look backwards, and we say, okay, what happened in 2022? And we appraise on market data what actually happened, right? And we appraise in a number of ways. We appraise using actual sales, right? And this doesn't matter what type of property it is. If we have sales, that's always the best indicator. If we don't have sales, what is the cost? What would it cost if I wanted to build an identical property? How much would I have to pay? And we all know what's happened with cost of anything. Right? Costs of everything have gone through the roof, right? And that's labor, the cost of money, the cost of materials. Every single thing you want to buy that goes into a home costs a lot more, okay? So we get to January 1 and we look back, right? I said we have sales, we have cost, and then depending on the type of commercial property, if it's an income-producing property, what is the income of that property because those are the way those properties are purchased based on what income stream that they can generate, right? What we don't do is prognosticate. We don't get to January 1 and say, what do we think is going to happen this year, right? We're not trying to figure out what we think is going to happen. We use historical data. And typically, we use, for residential, we would typically look back 1 year, and then for commercial, we'll typically look back 2 years, depending on how much data we have. Okay? So as most of you know, we start noticing in early March. Protest deadline is May 15th. Want to talk just a little bit, because I know I only have a short time. Want to talk a little bit about protesting. How many people have protested their property? All righty. All righty. So I just want to give my 2 cents on that, because ultimately, I really don't care what anyone's value is as long as it's appropriate and fair, right? And you know, fairness and equity are terms that are, you know, very prolific in today's world. All I want is for it to make sense. I really have no dog in the fight. Our appraisers really have no dog in the fight. It doesn't change, right? When I go into hearing and we appraised you at $1 million, I don't care if it comes out to 900,000 or 950 or 875, as long as it makes sense. To be successful in a hearing, especially when you're talking in front of an ARB, if you go to an ARB hearing, you have to remember that the ARB members do not work for the appraisal district. They do not necessarily have any training in real estate, appraisal, the local market. They are a jury of peers, right? I think about the only requirement for them is they cannot work for any of the jurisdictions, and they cannot work for the Harris County Appraisal District. It is like a jury. They are selected. Now, they're not volunteers. They get paid to be there, but they're not appraisal district employees. And matter of fact, our staff is not allowed to talk with them about anything appraisal related outside of a hearing. And by that, it's a crime. If our appraisers talk with ARB members outside of a hearing about anything related to value, they have committed a crime. And so we generally have a policy we don't talk to them at all. You know, outside of a hearing, there's just no good reason to talk with ARB members. Okay? Now, where I was going with this, though, is to be successful, right? Because remember, this is individuals who don't have any experience in commercial property or residential property. They don't know appraisal. So all they want to do when you come in and you're given an opportunity, I would say when you're protesting your property, have a good idea of what your property is worth and argue from that, right? If we've appraised your business for $500,000 and you think it's worth $350,000, come in with that argument. I think my property is worth this, and here's the reasons, right? You know, my building has these issues, or my property has flooding. Talk specifically about that. A lot of times we have people come in and they want to get into the minutia and the detail of what we've done. They don't really want to say they won't necessarily have an idea of what their property's worth. They just want to say, well, y'all have this factor, or I'm graded this, and they get into all this, and the board's like, I don't even know what those things are that you're talking about, these factors or influences, and all they want to know is what your opinion is and why. And if you get too much in the detail, you've kind of lost them, because they don't know the lingo. They don't know what our factors are. They don't know what the difference is between the primary lot and residual lot, and they don't. So if you get into all this detail, and I'm not talking to just the engineers out there, but don't overthink it, okay? Remember, you're talking to individuals that have no specific training in any of this. So come in and speak plain English. When you try to delve into the details and get too technical, they're like, I don't know what he's even saying. Okay, so that would be my advice. The second bit of advice, when you can, represent yourself, right? I know sometimes we're busy, I get it, and it's easy to hire an agency to represent you, and a lot of times you can hire them with no cost. If they don't save you anything, then you don't pay anything. The only reason I would say that is nobody's going to represent you like you are, and some of these agencies do 1,000 hearings a day. How well do you think you're represented if they're doing 1,000 hearings? And I'll quit bashing them now. Don't know. Like I said, I had a lot of slides here, but I knew I only had about 10 or 15 minutes, so I wanted to see if there was anything. This slide is residential properties, but what this does, and I think this picture tells a ton of words. This starts in 2013 and goes through 22. So this is 10 years evaluation. And what it is it just shows on this graph, if we did not, the value went down, then it's green. Right? And this is what each parcel did. We have roughly 1.3 million residential properties. So in the picture, if a parcel went down, it's green. If a parcel did not change, it's yellow. And if a parcel was increased that year, it's red. And so what this really shows you is what the market's done over this time span. Right? I talked about in 14, 15, you can see the market was kind of hot there. The periods in yellow, right? What happened here? 17, 18, right? Harvey, August of 17. So we got to 18 and we just stopped. Now, in a few areas where there was a lot of flooding, there's properties go down. But really the market just kind of paused and said, well, let's wait and see. And then you can see since the onset of COVID, the market has just gone through the roof with residential because the demand has gone through the roof. Now, commercial took a weird thing because you really kind of had commercial properties go in different directions, right? Like right now is probably a really bad time to own office space because those are tough to get tenants or keep tenants, and you're having to take all types of concessions. I think retail, especially retail that's things like clothing, things like that, that's gotten harder because people have moved to Amazon. Restaurants hurt for a while, but I don't know, everywhere I go in town, restaurants are just packed these days. So that's been interesting. And so things like with the onset of us buying things through Amazon all the time, you'll notice, and granted it started years ago, but the number of warehouses in Harris County is just going through the roof. It seems like every patch of ground, people are creating a warehouse to store products. And so commercial's been one of these interesting things where depending on the type of commercial, your properties could be going in any number of directions. Because there is so much more going on with the way we live our lives now. And matter of fact, we were just joking how it's funny how we use COVID now as a demarcation, right? There was 9/11 and the birth of Christ, and now there's COVID. It's literally, we benchmark everything pre-COVID and post-COVID. And so that's really just kind of interesting. But anyway, I just like this because this really shows what happened in the entire market, and this is what we saw. Now, I don't know that I really have anything else that is super interesting. We have a lot of dates. All the dates that we follow are legally, there's legally driven dates. The protest deadline and, times to file exemptions. All of those are established by the legislature, so nothing really to discuss there. What I'd like to do is really open it for questions from y'all, because I'm sure those are generally more interesting. Anybody?
So what's the objective on the appraisal? Is it to appraise the property at the actual market value, or there's always frequently a discrepancy between what you guys come up with and what market value is?
Okay.
Sometimes in our favor, in fact, it seems to be frequently in our favor, you're evaluating it below the market.
Okay, well, that is a great question. We are required by law to appraise properties at 100% of market value, okay? And this was actually established when they created appraisal districts in '79 with the Pivotal Bill. The idea at that time was to take appraisal districts and separate them from jurisdictions, because prior to this, all of these jurisdictions did their own appraisals. And something about that seems a little weird. You actually have the people who are going to assess and collect taxes are the one deciding what your value is, right? So that doesn't seem very good. And then the other part was there was no required limit. And so the problem is you could have two identical homes and your home's worth $1 million. We appraise it at $500,000. You're like, well, that's a good value because I know my home's worth $1 million. But the problem is your next door neighbor who has an identical house, we've appraised him at $400,000. And so it became really difficult to figure out what is the value and what is fair, because you're like, on one hand, I'm appraised at half of what I should be, but at the same time, I'm still more than that person. And so that is the benchmark. The law states we're supposed to appraise at 100% of market value, and that's the target we shoot for, okay? That's a great question. Thank you.
I apologize if I missed this, but how is the appraisal district actually funded?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. We are funded, all of the jurisdictions within Harris County pay us up to 1% of their role or their, I don't know how to, the money they collect, right? Whatever their tax assessments are, whatever they collect, they pay us 1% of the, up to 1% to fund our activities. Yeah, 1% of the just property taxes. Good question. Okay, so there's a number, we have a board of directors, okay, that's made up of a number of members that are, those are, our board of directors, most of them, but not all, are, like we have one person who represents all of the school districts. We have one person that represents all the MUD districts, one person who represents the cities. The assessor collector has a non-voting seat. And so our board of directors is made up of those individuals. Now, they are appointed, okay? Now, the interesting thing is they really only have, they hire the chief appraiser, they hire a TLO, which is a taxpayer liaison officer, and that's a person who basically handles all their administrative stuff. But other than that, they have very little authority, right? That they are not allowed to talk with us or have anything to do with values. Matter of fact, recently we had, at our last board meeting, we had a couple people come in, property owners, and want to, complain about what we did with this property and how we do appraisals. And the board's like, we have no authority to, we hire the chief appraiser and he handles appraisal matters, okay? Now, obviously the Texas legislature, we follow the tax code, the property tax code, and then the comptroller comes in and does annual studies. They do a property value study to make sure we're getting to a certain level, right? And we have to be within 95 and 105% of what they call local value. And if not, then things can happen to us, right? We then go into a thing where the next year they're going to test us again, and ultimately the state can come in and take over your appraisal district. Exactly. In our last property value study year, which was 21, the state came in and did their ratio studies and found that we were low in one school district. We were not high in any of them. They told us we were low in Pasadena. And so we appealed that, and we went through a rather long, we had an informal appeal, then we had an official appeal, and it took us several months, but we were able to contest a number of their appraisals and get within the local value. And they do that for us, it's every odd year. So again, 2023 is a property value study year. And then the other years, like I said, they do what's called a MAP. It's methods and assistance or methods and practices. Essentially, they make sure they're like, here's all the different laws. We have to demonstrate to them that we're following everything, that we're recording everything, complying with all of the different statutes. Because the legislative sessions, each year there's 7,000 or 8,000 bills that are launched. We end up tracking 300 or 400 of them that could affect us. And then usually by the time, the dust settles, there's, 20 or 30 bills that have some impact on what we do. And anyways, a lot of times those create new mandates for things we have to do, and sometimes it's things like just mail everyone who has a homestead, you're required by law to mail them a homestead, letting them know you still have their homestead on file, or, there's all types of things like that we're required to do. And again, the comptroller comes in to make sure we're complying. Yes, ma'am.
If Governor Abbott lowers our property taxes, will this affect your appraisal?
It will not. It will not. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It will not, right? Because our appraisals, and this is what I think is interesting, is that appraisal to me, it really is the idea of it and how it works is simple. Like actually doing appraisals is not simple, but the notion that we compare, right? Because all an appraisal is a comparison with what the market activity is doing. And that was another thing we were just briefly talking about this morning, right? Almost any product we buy, we comparison shop, right? If we're going to get gas, right, we're going to see if one gas station is charging 5 cents less than another, we're going to do that. Right? And if groceries are more expensive at H-E-B, then maybe we'll go to Kroger. And so people compare everything. And that's all an appraisal is a way of us comparing properties to actual market data and determining what the value is based on actual market data. Right? Because it doesn't matter if we're talking about sales comparison approach, the cost approach, or the income approach, which are the three recognized methods of appraisal. Every bit of the data we get in support of that, right? Whether it's the income streams, whether it's the cost to build something, every bit of that data comes from the market. Every year we update things like our cost schedules, our depreciation schedules, our time adjustment schedules, and we do all of that through market data. Nothing is us deciding behind the curtain what it should be. We let the market tell us, because again, at the end of the day, I don't care what the value is. It really does not affect me. I just need to know that when the state comes in, what are they going to say we did? Are they going to say we're right on the money? Are they going to say we're too high or too low? Typically, we're right on the money. Occasionally, like this last year with our 23 school districts, we had one that was low. All the other ones were 98 to 99%. Okay, so the question was, are the influx of people into Texas going to affect it? And absolutely. The biggest problem we've had is that we just don't have enough structures, whether it's commercial or residential. And if you see the number of homes they're still building, the number of warehouses they're building, we still can't keep up. We've had an inventory level for homes anyway, that has been at historic lows. And by historic lows, we're talking, realtors have always said, 4 to 6 months is kind of the equilibrium. Like back in the day, again, for us that are a little older, you'd list a home and you would hope to sell it in 3 to 6 months. Well, what we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, people were selling their homes in a weekend, right? And you even have realtors come tell you, you list your home Friday and we'll do an open house, and by Sunday you'll have 4 or 5 offers, okay? We even had something that I do this annual report with my board of directors, and one of the things we saw, and it was the first time I've ever seen it, in June and July of 21, we had 2 months. June and July are usually the biggest months of sales. You have anywhere from 8 to 10,000 sales happen, where the average sale price was greater than the list price. Right? And this is not for an incidental number of sales, right? I'm not talking about 5 sales or 10 sales. We're talking 8 to 10,000 sales where the average sale price was greater than the list price. That is phenomenal. And that is indicative of what's going on. The supply, and to get back to what your question is everyone worries about a bubble, right? Prices have gone so high that it's just going to get out of hand and have a bubble. Well, that's not what creates a bubble. What creates a bubble is when you have so much supply and no one to buy it, right? Because it doesn't matter what level the sales of homes are at, if there's still people in demand for them and people are still buying them. We still have a relatively low supply. Now, that being said, the inventory of homes, which was at like 1 month, 1.5 month a year ago, that number is doubled. So in a year, we've gone up to like 2.5 to 2.8 months, which is a huge jump in a year. So that inventory level is starting to build, but that's still half of what we've always considered equilibrium. So as long as, Texas is still a favorable place to be, for whatever reason, people want to be here, good jobs, relatively friendly business environment, you're going to have an influx of people. And so, as long as that type of environment exists, interest rates are going to be a little bit problematic because that is going to slow down economic activity, and which it has. And really, that's one of my biggest concerns is we are seeing a slowdown in economic activity. The problem is the number of sales and the sales level aren't tied at the hip, right? For years, we've seen just tremendous volume of sales, tons and tons of sales, and the value's pushing them up. The problem is now what we see is like you'll see news reports that says, sales crashing, sales down 30%, 40%. Well, that's the number of sales. That's not the level. Those are not the same things. Because the problem is once a person thinks their home's this or their property's this, they're not going to go down. They'll just stay there. If you tell me my home's worth 500 and then next year tell me it's worth 400 and I want to sell it, I'm not selling it for 400. I'll put it on the market for a year and leave it for 500, and if someone doesn't buy it, I'm just going to take it off the market. But prices are really what you call sticky downwards, so they don't want to go down, right? Because that's what each individual is trying to maximize their own good. And so that's what happens is you see this weird upward kind of way the stock market does, maybe not exactly, but prices kind of go up, plateau for a while, almost never come down. And when you look at that slide I showed a minute ago, look at how much you see in green there. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, I think we're going to see a year like this. Yeah, because again, what's going to happen is right, we base our values on market activity. And what we're not going to see is a bunch of properties selling low, right? Because people don't run out and say, oh, the market's down, let me run out and sell my property, right? People decide to wait. Like if they were going to build a new building or they were going to upgrade and buy a new home, now it's hard to do because you're at 3 or 3.5%. You're like, if I go buy that nicer house that I can now afford because I'm enjoying some prosperity, the cost of money is twice. Do I really want that house so much that I'm going to pay twice as much for the money, right? I'm going to pay 7% or 7.25%. So what you have is you have a time where we just drift along. And so I got a feeling 24, right? Here would be 23. That's 22. This is what happened in 22. 23, 24 is going to look really yellow. You're not going to see much green. You'll see some red. There's some areas that are forever going to go up because they're forever going to be in demand. The Heights and the Garden Oaks and the River Oaks, those are forever. They have limited number of properties. They're highly sought after. So even when areas go yellow, there's going to be some areas that are forever going to be red. They're always going to inch up. Yes. Now, commercial is really different because when you have something happen in the market, a lot of times residential will follow the same trend. Commercial's really different because you could have something like COVID, which takes different pieces, right? Like office space went probably this way, while apartments and warehouses probably went way up. So commercial is a little harder to predict based on the activity that you see, and I'm talking about construction activity. It seems like where there's so much demand right now is in apartments, and I think you're going to see apartments, and it's hard to tell what's going to happen with the value of apartments because the demand for apartments is going to go through the roof now because we have high interest rates, right? That prices a lot of people out of the market, so the demand for apartments is going to go up. The question is, do they overbuild, right? And that's what I don't have a good feeling for. Right? Because at the end of the day, all of these commodities, no matter what we're talking about, it's going to be the balance between how much supply is available and how much demand is there is going to tell you where the values go, right? I would tend to think with these elevated interest rates, if these persist, especially if we go into recession, the demand for apartments is going to go up because people are just going to be priced out of the market. They're not going to have the down payment. And they certainly don't want to take on a 7.5% interest rate, which is going to push the demand for apartments up. It'll be interesting to see what happens with retail. I think brick and mortar retail, some of the niche places will continue to do well, and of course the Walmarts and things like that will do well. But I don't know, like some malls, it's funny because you have some malls in the area that just seem like they're just dying a slow death. And then you have others really prospering. I mean, And so it's really hard to tell what could happen within some of the markets because some of it's really, really based on that specific area. Okay, sorry if I was all over the map on that. Just commercial's not a one size fits all the way residential can be. Yes, sir.
Yeah, does depreciation play a part in evaluating properties? And if so, where?
You said depreciation? Yes. Okay. Question is, and I'll repeat this, is does depreciation play a role in properties? It absolutely does. The problem is depreciation is such a slow thing, and I'm talking about normal depreciation. Depreciation comes in a lot of forms, right? Like if I build a house today, over the next 30 or 40 years, it's going to slowly wear out. Some of the items, short-lived items like my appliances and the flooring and the AC, that's going to depreciate quickly. But as long as nothing happens to the house, like a tree falls on it or a car comes through, it's going to depreciate slowly over a long period of time. The problem is, when we're in a market like this, the appreciation, like the cost of something, so far outpaces depreciation, it's not even close, right? Like someone gave me the example the other day, like a sheet of plywood, right, 4x8, I don't know what they call it, I don't know what the specific name is, but 5 years ago, 6 years ago was $8 a sheet, and it's now $60. So that sheet of plywood is going to depreciate slowly over 60 or 70 years, and yet it's gone up 600% in the last 5 years, right? So depreciation is a thing. The problem is when you have a market like this, the appreciation is so through the roof, no pun intended, that the depreciation is so high that depreciation has almost no factor, right? Because the cost, right, like anytime you do, like if I estimate the cost of a property, I estimate the cost based on what it costs to build today, right? Like if you built a home 5 years ago and say, well, I paid $100,000 to build this home 5 years ago, with depreciation, it should be less. The problem is when I estimate the cost to build the home, I don't estimate what it would have cost to build 5 years ago. I estimate what it would cost today. And that $100,000 structure you built is probably $250,000 or $300,000 today, right? So the depreciation over 5 years is 4 or 5%. But I would still, you saying, well, I paid $100,000, it should be worth $95,000, and I'm like, no. Today it would cost $250,000 to build, and then you might have 5% depreciation on it, right? So does that make sense? The problem is our costs. The cost of every single commodity has gone through the roof, and so much of that is things like labor and wood and concrete, all these big things. They've, in some cases, right, like labor probably hasn't gone up 200%, but it's gone up, seems like, right? Like, I think, I don't even know what our minimum wage now, legally anyway, is what, 7.25? But nobody will work for that. I mean, nowadays, you go to Buc-ee's, you can get a job at Buc-ee's for 18. Go to Jack in the Box and get 18. And so all of that cost has to be absorbed somewhere, right? It's always the same people absorb it. Consumers get all of that, right? Yes, sir.
So on our tax forms, that's the difference between a market value and appraisal. That's what you just.
Okay. Well, no. The difference between market and appraisal, that's talking about a residential cap, right? And the way a residential cap is, once you have a homestead, the second January you have a homestead, you are now qualify under Section 2323 of the Property Tax Code. You now qualify for a cap. So no matter what crazy number we put on your home was $100,000 last year. This year we say it's worth $200,000. If it's a residential homestead, the taxable amount, where the taxing jurisdiction starts, that number can't go up by more than 10%. So I'm sorry. Yeah, because so last year it was 100,000. This year we say the market is 200, but your appraised would be 110, right? And so that's how right now I think we have 70 or 80% of the homes in Harris County, if they're homesteaded, they're capped. I mean, I know my home has gone up. Like I said, my home's gone up 50% in the last 2 to 3 years, and so my market value is like 5 something, but my cap is 400 because we've gone up so high, 2 or 3 years in a row. Okay. I think I'm out of time. You're out of time. I'm out of time. Again, my name is Steve Ashton. I have a number of my workers here, and we can be around for a few minutes if any of y'all have personal questions. Okay? Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Steve. That was very, very interesting. We appreciate it a great deal. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. I appreciate all of your attention, and I especially appreciate all the questions. It helped kind of cement the things that are going on at the appraisal district. We also, as you're leaving today, I want you to pick up the new map of the district, outlining all of the businesses that are in the area, and also pay attention to the fact that that's now online, so you can identify businesses that you're looking for, and for attention, and spend some time in the district buying stuff. We want you to watch out for the Business Network Breakfast. It's September 7th, and that's going to be our mayoral forum discussion. And who isn't running for mayor, you guys can come as audience members, but there seems to be a bunch of candidates that are coming, and we're looking forward to that as being a great informational opportunity for all of us. And then on October 3rd is our National Night Out. Again, it's one of the city's largest national night outs, and we want to make sure that you're all involved. If you have a small business you want to be part of, make sure that you want to broadcast that by having a booth at our National Night Out. See Walter over here. See Walter if you want to reserve your space today. If not, he'll be calling you to get you scheduled for your space. That's going to be October 3rd. That really pretty much takes care of it. Thank you all once again very much for being here. I appreciate your attention. Our next meeting is going to be, I don't have the date, the 7th, September 7th. Okay? Thank you all.